So in my free time, as of late, I've been super obsessed with video game retrospectives. Something about watching someone else break down and really go into detail about stuff really catches my eye. Thought-provoking conversation and detailed discussions get me thinking about things around me that I can analyze or break down myself. So with this in mind, I ask you two questions. Should fighting games be fair? And does fairness make fighting games objectively better? Now, not to get confused with balance. Fair by definition means unbiased, free from favor on both sides. Balance by definition means different elements being equal. So strictly by definition, fair can be decided based on whether or not the game is balanced. Though of course things aren't so black and white. In video games, balance is a term used to measure the strength of a character and whether or not the weaknesses work to make the character fair to play against. Take for example, Bayonetta from Smash 4. Players actually compared her to Meta Knight, which was basically a character that got banned in Smash Bros. Brawl because his moveset was just way too good. A lot of players actually said that she was ruining the games. However, that's an opinion, even if it was shared by a large group of players. On a local scale, this might not be too significant, because player skill and accessibility is limited, but larger tournaments where pros consistently attend and compete at the highest level are different. Not only is the skill gap much higher, but we're talking about people who play these games for a living. You know, people who put hours and hours into honing their craft and adapting to the changing metagame. They would know what works best to counter these characters, yet when you make a mistake and get juggled at 0% until you die, whether the character is balanced or not comes into question. The game becomes less about interactions and outsmarting your opponents and more about who gets the first hit on somebody. Now, this isn't to say that long damaging combos are the problem, because plenty of fighting games give you the opportunity to get a ton of damage on somebody after they whiff or block incorrectly. Most fighting games are not balanced, but are fair. Now, what do I mean by that? Using the same definitions from earlier, one of the appeals that fighting games have is their character. You have zoning characters who are stronger at ranges and might spam projectiles, for example. You have grapplers who might be slow, and once they get in close, they might be able to dish more damage out, as opposed to more balanced characters that can do both, but are neither good at range or at being very close to your opponent. Hypothetically, with the exact same knowledge of the game and its mechanics, if two players were to pick the same character, then what decides the winner? Obviously, that would be the player with more skill. They understand how to make these mechanics work for them rather than against them. They might have the same knowledge and characters at their disposal, but one of them might, for example, be more clever in how they use them, or unpredictable. Newer players in the fighting game community tend to see long combo strings, flashy special moves, and when they lose without understanding why they lost, it turns them away. Recently, I've introduced 3 of my friends into Dragon Ball FighterZ. In total, there are 5 of us playing, if you count me. Since my other friend and I have been playing for much longer, we were more experienced and enjoyed it, while the 3 friends we started teaching didn't enjoy it as much and slowly turned away from the game. This is what I like to call the perception of unfairness, and it's something that I suffer from as well. One friend kept trying to block my attacks, but I kept doing low and high mix-ups on him. This posed a problem that they couldn't solve at their current skill level. The match was not fair, but it was balanced. They had access to all of the characters I did. They even had access to more of the characters that I did, since I don't have every DLC character, and they did. The mechanics didn't change just because we picked different characters, and we even had some mirror matches regardless. What makes this unfair was the fact that they simply didn't know what their tools were or how to use them.
Hey yo, bro, why are you yelling at the mic?
Oh, sorry.
Wait, what? I wasn't even on the ground yet.
Yeah, well, you were.
In the words of the G.I. Joe cartoon, knowing is half the battle, and if you don't know how things work, even if they're given to you so that you can use them, doesn't mean that you will be able to use them. With intent, that is. Which brings me to my second question. Does fairness make fighting games objectively better? Well, I believe a good fighting game lays out the rules clearly and leaves it up to the player to improve upon those established rules. Street Fighter, Smash Bros., Tekken. These are all popular franchises because the rules are consistent. When you miss something, it's your fault, not the game's fault. When a new player gets cheesed by a bad hitbox, they may feel that the game is at fault. They might rage, and a more experienced player, however, might recognize the hitbox as knowledge that they should be aware of next time, as long as the hitbox isn't ridiculously skewed. Hypothetically, let's create a game where all the attacks do a set amount of damage. Punches do 3 damage, kicks do 4, but are slightly slower than a punch. And to balance this out, let's give it a little bit more range. Special moves do 8 damage and are slower to come out than both of them. And lastly, a player has 10 health per round. Character choice wouldn't matter in such a game, and the skill ceiling would be very low. Also, in my opinion, it wouldn't be very fun to watch. Of course, there would be outsmarting and strategies implemented to optimize gameplay, but making it fair, it sacrifices room for growth. Player growth, meta growth, and essentially you're limiting yourself the more you try to make every character fair rather than making every character balanced. There wouldn't be epic stories of villains in fighting games, exceptional mains, and monumental upsets. At least not to the degree that there is with the communities that I've witnessed this happen in. It just wouldn't be enjoyable destroying your friends with a bad character or cheering for Axe because he doesn't just play Fox or Falco. All of these games that I've mentioned have grown, the players have improved, the amount of spectators have increased, in part to the internet as well, and fighting games are becoming bigger than we could have ever imagined. I don't think nearly as much improvement in skill or strategy could have happened without the way these games are balanced or the community itself. After all, they're the ones who play the game, so I feel it's relevant to mention without them being as passionate as they are, some of these games may have never reached their full potential and would be very different games than they are today. Fairness doesn't make fighting games better. The very nature of mechanics or characters being unfair drives players to push the limits of what's possible, and that in itself, I think is pretty sick. Of course, I probably missed mentioning things, and there are things I could have added, or maybe you think that there's something that I could have added to this video. If so, please share with your friends and subscribe if you like this video. It's a discussion, so any feedback would be appreciated. Feel free to disagree or agree and tell me why you feel the way you do. I just don't want this video to be too much longer, and with that, I think I'm done, so peace.